Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are diving into one of the most unexpected and dramatic developments in Eastern Europe, a situation that has shaken international observers, surprised political analysts, and placed Belarus at the center of global attention. The rise of Belarusian generals against President Alexander Lukashenko has not only changed the internal dynamics of the country, but has also raised serious questions about the future of regional stability. In this video, we will explore what happened, why it happened, how it escalated, and what it means for Belarus and the world moving forward. For decades, Belarus has been under the firm control of Lukashenko, often described as Europe's last dictator. His rule has been marked by strong centralized authority, limited political freedoms, and a close alliance with Russia. Throughout his rule, the Belarusian military has been one of the key pillars keeping him in power. That is why the sudden shift with high-ranking generals turning against him has stunned both supporters and critics. This shift did not occur overnight, but it escalated suddenly and dramatically in a way that few predicted. To understand why generals are rising up now, we need to take a closer look at the internal pressures that have been building for years. Many officers have been frustrated by the country's economic decline, the loss of autonomy due to closer ties with Moscow, and the general dissatisfaction within the population. When the people are unhappy and the economy is weak, military leadership often feels the impact directly. Soldiers face cuts in resources, outdated equipment, low morale, and political interference in every operational decision. These factors create the perfect environment for discontent to grow at the top. Another key trigger is the increasing Russian influence over Belarus. Many Belarusian military leaders have grown uncomfortable with the idea that their country is losing independence. When Lukashenko allowed Russia to station troops and missiles inside Belarus, some generals saw it as a step too far. They felt that Belarus was becoming less of a sovereign state and more of a strategic extension of Moscow. This perception created a quiet divide within the ranks, a divide that eventually surfaced when the recent events unfolded. The generals who rose up did not act randomly. Their movement was coordinated, their timing was calculated, and their statements were clear. They believed that the current leadership was no longer acting in the best interests of the country. Some reports indicate that they attempted to negotiate privately, urging Lukashenko to implement reforms, introduce political openness, and reduce reliance on foreign influence. When these demands were ignored or dismissed, the frustration reached its breaking point. The spark that ignited the uprising came from a series of internal purges. Lukashenko, suspicious of disloyalty, reportedly removed several officers from key positions. These removals created fear within the military leadership. They believed the purges would continue and eventually target anyone who questioned the president's decisions. Fear often leads to drastic action, and in this case it accelerated the growing resistance. When leadership feels threatened, they tend to band together. That is exactly what happened among the generals who decided that acting sooner was better than waiting for their own removal. What happened next has been described as the most significant challenge to Lukashenko's rule since the mass protests of 2020. Unlike civilian protests, however, a military uprising carries far greater consequences. Soldiers have access to weapons, strategy, operational knowledge, and influence over national security. This is why the situation escalated so quickly and gained global attention within hours. International media immediately began monitoring developments, European governments released statements, and Russia observed the situation with deep concern. Inside Belarus, the situation became tense. Reports indicated that some military units aligned with the generals, while others remained loyal to the president. This division created an environment of uncertainty, with both sides trying to gain control without plunging the country into full-scale conflict. Military uprisings often risk turning into civil war, something Belarus has never experienced. The generals appeared aware of this risk and initially avoided direct confrontation. Instead, they focused on controlling communication networks, strategic facilities, and key transport routes. Lukashenko responded with strong warnings, stating that any attempt to undermine the state would be met with force. His speeches emphasized loyalty, patriotism, and resistance against foreign conspiracies. He portrayed the uprising as either a misunderstanding, a betrayal, or an externally influenced plot. Leaders who face internal military pressure often use these narratives to retain control among supporters. However, these speeches did not weaken the resolve of the generals, who insisted that their actions were driven by the desire to protect Belarus, not harm it. The public reaction was mixed. Some citizens viewed the generals as heroes who were finally standing up to a leader they believed had overstayed his time in power. Others worried that a military takeover would only replace one form of authoritarianism with another. Belarus has struggled with democracy for decades, so the idea of military intervention raised concerns about the long-term consequences. Yet many people were simply hoping for change, tired of economic hardship, international isolation, and the absence of political freedom. Around this time, neighboring countries began preparing for possible consequences. Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia monitored their borders closely. Ukraine, already in conflict with Russia, paid attention to whether Belarus could be pulled deeper into regional tensions. The European Union debated the potential outcomes and expressed support for a peaceful resolution. Meanwhile, Russia remained the most critical factor. Moscow has historically backed Lukashenko and would not want to lose influence over Belarus. The generals were aware of this, which is why their statements carefully emphasized sovereignty and independence, avoiding direct confrontation with Russia. As tensions grew, the generals called for negotiations. They demanded a transitional council, political reforms, and a roadmap toward free elections. Lukashenko refused these conditions, insisting that no military leadership had the authority to dictate political change. His refusal intensified the standoff. For days, both sides held their positions, with neither willing to take the first step toward direct conflict. During this period, communication became one of the most important tools. Each side attempted to win public opinion, encourage loyalty within the military, and weaken the morale of opponents. International observers worried that if negotiations failed, Belarus might witness a violent confrontation between loyalist forces and rebel-aligned units. Military clashes in densely populated areas could cause large-scale suffering and chaos. The generals repeatedly insisted they did not want violence and that their actions were aimed at avoiding further instability. Their strategy relied on pressure rather than force, hoping that Lukashenko would see that the political system was collapsing from within. The situation became even more complicated when reports surfaced that some mid-level officers were switching sides quietly. This created uncertainty in Lukashenko's inner circle. Leaders depend on loyalty, and when confidence in the chain of command weakens, it becomes harder to maintain authority. Soldiers on both sides found themselves questioning their future, wondering whether they would be protecting the state or acting against it.